Okay. Aye.
In the early 2000s, the French press began circulating an unbelievable story dubbed The Recluses of Monflanquin. It concerned 11 members of a wealthy family known as the Vedrines, who suddenly locked themselves inside of their home in an act of self-imposed isolation. The French newspaper Le Monde was the first to break the story with an article titled The Mystery of Monflanquin. The article contained interviews with baffled neighbors who told the paper that prior to sequestering themselves, the Vedrines were a well-liked and well-respected family in the village who had since become known as the local crackpots. The Vedrines later sued the journalist who wrote the article for an invasion of privacy and won. Those who knew the family said they started to notice their radical shift in behavior by mid-2001. Around that time, 11 members of the Vedrines family began to shun neighbors, friends, relatives, as well as even their own spouses and children. They accused everyone outside of their tight-knit group of secretly being Freemasons who intended to harm them and even outright kill them. On January 4th of 2002, a neighbor visited them to see what was wrong. She told Le Monde that she peered through the window and saw that, quote, "They were all there, sitting motionless in the dark. The little visible light was from the dim glow of their Christmas tree. Anyone who tried to step onto their property, even the mailman, wouldn't be allowed past the gates. The family would immediately shout and warn them off. Sometimes visitors would be attacked." The question of what happened to the Vedrines, what led to their collective insanity, doesn't have any simple answers. But one thing is clear. The Védrines were a perfectly normal family until a Rasputin-like conman named Thierry Tilly stepped into their lives. The Vedrines are an old family, an aristocratic family. Descending from a line of Protestant country landowners, their history in the bucolic village of Monflanquin stems back to the 17th century during King Louis XIV's reign. The family owned a summer house in Monflanquin called Chateau Martel. Chateau Martel sat perched on a hill overlooking their land, spanning 50 hectares. There's a sense of timelessness to their chateau and Monflanquin as a whole. Monflanquin, with its winding arcades and 14th century medieval buildings, looks like something out of a fairy tale. So it's no wonder why it's known as one of the most beautiful and well-preserved medieval Bastide towns in all of France. A tight-knit clan, the Vedrines often spent their summers together at Chateau Martel. Their children, who are all close in age, grew up riding bikes along the countryside, swimming in the lakes, and enjoying the idyllic paradise that is Monflanquin. They lived quiet lives of privilege. To their neighbors, they were a well-respected family of high standing, who were known to organize village festivals and elaborate parties. The Vedrines were not, as one might imagine, an exorbitantly wealthy family. Instead, they were only aristocrats by name, meaning they still had to work. For example, Charles-Henri de Védrines was a gynecologist and obstetrician, as well as a former political candidate. Ghislaine was the director of a Paris-based secretarial school, and their eldest brother, Philippe de Védrines, was a civil engineer for Shell Oil. This story begins during the summer of 1997, when Ghislaine first met Thierry Tilly. During this time, Ghislaine was stressed and in over her head. A year earlier, she was part of a group of parents who took over their children's school when it was teetering on bankruptcy and was set to shut down in the middle of the school year. They all had children who were close to finishing their studies at the school, so they figured that as long as they can keep it afloat until summer, their children could at least finish the term. Leading them was a lawyer named Vincent David, who helped them win their case against the school staff. After a victory in court over teachers vying for the same position, Ghislaine was appointed a role as the school's director. However, the elation of this small victory over the teachers did not last, as there was still a lot to be done to keep the school from financial collapse. The school's myriad issues were as follows. Its coffers were empty, its registration was plummeting, its computer system was obsolete, and it was in desperate need of maintenance. It was through Vincent David that Ghislaine first met Thierry Tilly. She was looking for a cleaning company for the school, and Vincent David recommended Tilly's company for the job. Tilly, being a plain-looking, short-statured man, didn't leave a lasting impression at first. However, as time went on, Ghislaine found herself more and more drawn to him. And that was because he made himself indispensable to her. Whenever a setback took place, Tilly was there to fix it. For example, when she mentioned in passing that the school's computer system needed to be replaced, Tilly had it sorted out by the next day. Gradually, she began to trust and depend on him as a highly competent fixer of her problems. She was also taken in by his elusiveness. She wondered who this man was who she found to be discreet, eternally busy, and one step ahead of everybody else. He was always dressed fashionably, and always moving quickly as if he had many appointments to attend to. Thierry Tilly was a complete mystery to her, so she asked her lawyer, Vincent David, about him. Vincent told her that Tilly was a highly connected man who owned 10 companies and who knew some very powerful people. When she asked him why such an influential person would spend his time helping a failing school, Vincent David told her that Tilly had taken an interest because he saw its potential. He added that Tilly was a trustworthy and philanthropic person. And what Vincent David said next would add an extra layer to Tilly's mystique. According to him, Tilly was so highly connected to influential people that the reason they were able to take over the school rather than the teachers was because Tilly intervened. After hearing that, Ghislaine began to see Tilly as a possessor of extraordinary powers, a man with enough say to influence even court proceedings. At the time, Ghislaine's son, Francois, had been facing difficulties in school, and Tilly was there to take the depressed and aimless boy under his wing in the form of an internship. He also listened to his problems and gave him advice. Ghislaine was thrilled that her underachieving son had Tilly as a mentor, and she believed that the bond her son had been forming with Tilly would bode well for his future. But what she didn't know at the time was that Tilly would go on to dominate her and her family's lives for the next 12 years. By the beginning of 1999, she hired him full-time. It was her lawyer, Vincent David, who persuaded Ghislaine to bring him on board in an official capacity. And in a little over a year, he helped the dwindling school increase its enrollment. First, he got her to rename the school from La Femme Secrétaire to IFSAD, Institution for the Formation of Superior Directorial Assistants. Along with the name change would be a change in direction, one that sought to attract international students, especially from China. In her memoir titled Diabolique, Ghislaine writes, "With Tilly's help, I am certain that we will succeed and become the great international academy we dream of. And what psychological comfort for me. The man who understands me so well, who knows how to appease and advise me, is now with us, in our team. I could not have imagined a more promising solution." By this point, Ghislaine no longer made any decisions concerning the school without first consulting Tilly, believing that her decision-making alone was insufficient. This points to something subtle but crucial to Tilly's hold on her. By leaving her decision-making up to him, it shows that from very early on, she was willing to give up her autonomy, her agency, and was trusting that he wouldn't abuse such a one-sided power dynamic. Spoilers, he did. Soon his salary was more than double hers, and he was being given bonuses that no other staff member was entitled to. Although his role was officially as just an assistant, he was effectively running the school and being paid the highest salary. This also left the school's coffers open for him to systematically bilk from until there was nothing left. With Ghislaine, Tilly played a long con. He spent 3 years becoming her trusted friend before making any major moves. In Ghislaine, Tilly had found the perfect mark. Like most victims of con artists and cult manipulation, she was vulnerable and in a stressful, transitory period of her life. As Stephen Hassan, one of the leading experts on the topic of destructive cults, writes, quote, "The stress is often due to some kind of major transition, moving to a new town, starting a new job, breaking off a relationship, experiencing financial instability, or losing a loved one. People in such situations tend to have defense mechanisms that are overloaded or weakened. If they don't know how to spot and avoid destructive cults, they are easy prey." Ghislaine fit this profile perfectly. She was stressed from running a school that was nearly bankrupt. She was grieving the recent deaths of her father and her older sister. That same year, her husband Jean Marchand had his magazine go bankrupt. As a result, he had his own problems, giving him a great deal of stress, and he wasn't always there to listen to her. The distance she was experiencing in her marriage left her wanting for someone to lean on. Then Tilly arrived at the perfect moment to support her. He listened to her, offered solutions to her problems, mentored her son Francois, and promised her a brighter future for her failing school. Whenever she confided in Tilly, their dynamic was analogous to a patient bearing her soul to a therapist. And just like a therapist, Tilly never really shared anything about himself. Instead, he just listened. She'd share liberally, completely unaware that he was listening, not out of concern, but instead to size up his prey. He was probing her for her weaknesses, her vulnerabilities, and her idiosyncrasies. And he did this all so he could better ensnare her. She was so seduced by his concern for her school and personal life that she shared everything without thinking. As she told him about her family, their conflicts, disagreements, jealousies, rivalries, values, and their hierarchical system, Tilly took mental notes and didn't forget a single word. He probed her for details. Details he would later use to manipulate her and 10 other members of her family. This is also how Tilly came to know of the properties that her family owned, as well as the bigger picture of their lives. August 2000. Thierry Tilly meets the family. Like most summers, the family spent it together at Chateau Martel. But unlike most summers, Ghislaine de Védrines had invited an enigmatic man to spend it with them named Thierry Tilly. Inside the walls of the manor, Tilly's pending arrival was one thing on everybody's minds. According to what Ghislaine had told them about him, Thierry Tilly was an extremely intelligent and highly influential man who rubbed shoulders with those belonging to the upper echelon of society. He knew former presidents, business leaders, and possessed an address book enviable by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. She let them know just how much he had changed her life and how much he could change theirs. Therefore, when Thierry Tilly arrived for dinner that night, members of the Vedrines clan had already been primed to be quickly taken in by him. Sat at the head of the table, he spoke unreservedly. He appeared to be refined, cultured, and erudite. Whatever the topic of discussion, Tilly had something insightful to say about it, and he seemed to possess an expertise in all domains. He spoke with familiarity about methods of encryption with Ghislaine's nephew Frédéric, who was an engineer at Microsoft. He imparted legal advice to another family member, warning them that their property business was almost certainly illegal. With Charles Henri's son, Guillaume, he used, quote, terminology that revealed a knowledge of information technology completely inaccessible to the general public. Tilly spent the entire month of August staying in a rental house close by to the Vedrines chateau. He visited them every day and had long one-on-one chats with family members. One-on-one was Tilly's preferred method of conversation. He was like a chameleon adjusting himself to better match his interlocutors, in order to better win their favor. With Philippe, he used his background as a civil engineer and former member of the French army to flatter him. He would say things like, "Philippe, you were in Algeria. You've been under fire. You're the only one who understands what I'm talking about." And, "Philippe, you should be the president of Shell Oil." Philippe later told Ghislaine of his admiration for Tilly, calling him a remarkable man marked by respect for tradition, yet carrying a vision for the future of humanity. But what impressed them most about Tilly was the influence he seemed to wield over courts and government agencies. It appeared to them that he was able to step in and help them overcome impossible battles, which they were sure they had already lost. One such case occurred when Ghislaine advised her brother, Charles Henri, to seek counsel from Tilly about the family's ongoing legal problem associated with the sale of one of their properties in La Case, which had severe structural damage. The new owners had alleged that the family had sold them the home while concealing its damage. The case was handed over to Vincent David, with Tilly playing an advisory role. Soon, the Vedrines learned that the legal suit against them had been dropped, a development which they attributed to Thierry Tilly. Another example of Tilly demonstrating his sway over official matters occurred when the music festival, which Ghislaine organized annually, was put under review due to matters concerning grants. Ghislaine worked tirelessly over the next few days, going through the festival's books and putting together a report. Just when she was about to hand it in, Tilly stopped her, telling her that he will speak to them on her behalf. An hour later, he returned, telling her that everything was in order and that she wouldn't have to pay a cent. After winning over the rest of Ghislaine's family, he offered them financial advice. He suggested that they allow him to review their portfolios to see if their financial investments were in the right place. Upon review, he told them that they weren't. He then implied that their financial advisors were not dependable. Tilly claimed that he could vastly increase the value of their capital if they entrust their investments with his company called Presswell Limited. Tilly advised them that he could get them 11 to 14% return on their investments per month, which he claimed to be able to do because of his insider knowledge of world markets. After a month, somehow he delivered. Going forward, he became a daily fixture in their lives. He wined and dined them at expensive restaurants in Paris and London. He let Guillaume, Charles Henri's son, stay in his condo in the center of Manhattan while Guillaume was in New York for an internship. There, he introduced the young man to a real estate billionaire named Charles F., who owned some 20 high-rise buildings in Manhattan and was one of the most influential property developers in New York. Tilly seduced them with the promise of money, investments, connections, and of an easy gain for themselves and for their children. They were all thrilled by the idea that a man of his stature and prominence had become their own personal confidant and close friend, which is perhaps why, in their intoxicated glow, they accepted the insane shit that he told them next. Brace yourself, because what I'm about to say is a lot to take in. He told the family about a conspiracy targeting them. He said that he was a member of a secret governmental organization whose mission was to guarantee balance in the world by fighting against all forms of corruption. He told them that he was actually a secret agent, sent to protect them from enemies targeting them. According to him, his secret society, an offshoot of the Knights of the Round Table, sought out great and deserving families in order to ensure their survival by protecting them from their enemies. He told them that Freemasons and Rosicrucians were everywhere. He told them to beware of homosexuals and Jews. He said that it was their family's destiny to stand up for good against evil, as their ancestors had done during the reign of Louis XIV in resisting Catholic oppression. He told them that enemies wanted to ruin their family, to destroy them, and to make them disappear because they, the Vedrines, were a living memory of what nobility used to mean, and that they reflected the greatness of what France once was. He told them that their family was one of the chosen few who would help restore France to what it used to be. And guess what? They believed him.
That's all you